Two more rocks reporting from down under. I would like to give what I hope are my final thoughts on the terrible massacre in Christchurch. I trust that this is the case. I'm saying this because I'm doubtful at this stage as to whether any major revelations are going to come out, anything that we don't already know, especially given the heavy censorship. I deal with grief on a daily basis. The unravelling of the ecosystem in real time is a major part of this. The spectre of war that's always there with every geopolitical convulsion. The breakdown of every aspect of our life, economic, political, moral, ethical, is another. But now there's a whole new source of grief, and it revolves around the fate that has befallen, or rather been imposed, on the city where I grew up and knew, or thought I knew, so well. So firstly, and all of this corresponds with the John Key government's election in 2008. First, way back then, they, and I mean the government and the people that they represent, wanted Canterbury's water and other resources. So the first thing they did was sack the democratically elected representatives who promised to put a spanner in their works, in their plans. So they cancelled democracy, democratic election, and put in their own hand-picked commissioners to facilitate this theft. Then in 2011 came the earthquakes in Christchurch. Whether as an act of God or by design, we'll never know. They have ripped the guts out of the city so much that 8 years later, the city is still reeling. Whatever the truth of the earthquakes is, the next bit is not subject to any speculation. All of this opened up disaster capitalism, which allowed the continuing rape of Canterbury's resources and the destruction of its environment and the rebuilding of Christchurch and the image of that fat slob, Jerry Brownlee, and the John Key government. The entire face of Canterbury changed in the 10 years of the John Key government, changed beyond recognition. And then in 2016-17, a new government was voted in that has not reversed but continued this agenda. And then next, a massacre in 2 mosques that's hit the city it's hit the city, and it's also hit me emotionally. Firstly, because 50 people died and 50 were injured in an outrage that one could not possibly even imagine in this remote, peaceful city of Christchurch. Secondly, this has, as I have already said, dealt a terrible blow to the city that I grew up in and loved. It is terrible to hear the names of streets that I know so well mentioned and associated with a crime as terrible as any other that has been committed anywhere else in the Western world. And the only blessing that I can think of in all of this is that my parents and my relatives, uncles and aunts, didn't have to go through either the earthquake or this outrage. Yes, this was carried out by a 20-year-old from Australia, only newly arrived in the country. But he could not and did not carry out this act on his own, and I hope once again to demonstrate this. But first I have a message that I want to direct at the powers that be, the government, police, spy agencies and the lamestream media. I know you're watching this. You're aware of everything I do and say. You've made both the live stream video of the murders and the manifesto illegal, so I'm not going to refer to either. I'm nobody's fool, so I don't believe for a single moment, not for a single instant, the reasons that you give for this action. So I'll rely on interviews that come straight out of television and point out things that directly contradict the lies of the official narrative, and on the research of others that are a bit more free because they're overseas to follow the evidence. I've done very little primary research of my own, again due to censorship, and rely on the words of others along with my own powers of observation and discrimination. I've not looked at the video since the second day of this, when the authorities decided to arrest and make an example of the couple of young people who shared the video. They might have done something else besides. I've not looked at, and no, I am not interested in the manifesto because I regard it as an absolute fake. You may want to shut down all discussion of this and lead people passively to accept what you have in mind. But I assert these rights that are enshrined in the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Quote, you have the right to think what you like. And, quote, you can say what you like and share information and ideas with people. So that's exactly what I am doing. But I can imagine a time very soon, and why not after recent events, when there will be another terrorist attack, perhaps committed by Muslim extremists this time, by ISIS. Imagine what sort of confusion that will create in people. And I can also imagine that there might be cross-party consensus for rescinding the Bill of Rights. And then, in the twinkling of an eye, all our hard-earned rights will be thrown out the window. The news last night and this morning is that gun laws that were probably already waiting in the wings, they've acted so quickly, will result in harsh penalties for possession of a semi-automatic or automatic gun. If the John Key government's main defining characteristic was criminality, then I would say the main defining characteristic of this government is hypocrisy. Rank hypocrisy. So, nothing illustrates this better than revelations that not 5 months ago, in December last year, our Prime Minister chaired a parliamentary committee that brought in unbelievably lax gun regulations. Now, since then, they've taken the unprecedented step of trying to remove the traces by taking down the official notification of these regulations. Now, what's worse than that is that despite our regulations, the country is absolutely awash with automatic and semi-automatic weapons. But this is a result of their own actions and their policies. I've been told by someone I trust, who is a hunter and therefore knows people in the gun fraternity, that in the late 1980s, the army, when they were upgrading, released a whole heap of weapons, semi-automatic weapons, onto the open market. In addition, an unknown quantity of weapons has been made available on the black market through graft and corruption at ports of entry. And then there remains the question of how a Brenton Tarrant, an Australian, only recently arrived in New Zealand, who as an Australian was not eligible for a gun licence, got one nevertheless. Perhaps he didn't need to, because there's so many guns in the country, and he wouldn't have perhaps had difficulty. I don't know. So let's look at evidence that points to the fact that I regard as uncontrovertible that the gunman Brenton Tarrant did not shoot and kill 50 people. He did, sorry, but that he was not acting on his own. No way was he acting on his own. And I will give as evidence 3 interviews that are open source from the horse's mouth, and they come from television media. So this is the first one, if I can find it. Oh no. Sorry, I'm going to have to find it again. You think you have everything set up.
Friday is our congregational day of prayer, so it'll be the one day of the week that is guaranteed to have the maximum number of people at the mosque.
And it seems there was a chilling warning that wasn't heeded.
From what I understand, and I didn't see it myself, there was a Facebook post posted on a community Facebook page stating that there would be an attack today and in Christchurch, and I do know that that information was given to police.
So sorry. Okay, now let's just see if I can get back to this.
Friday is our
sorry. And then this, which came several days later.
Here with Focus Live from Christchurch again, where we are talking to Saeed Mazharuddin, a witness in the Linwood Mosque this afternoon. Saeed, what did you see in there?
While we were praying, we were standing and praying our regular Jummah prayer, Friday, a weekly prayer, and suddenly, right in front of my window, I heard gunshots, and because I can easily say it was very near to me, and suddenly there was people got feared and they were screaming around, and seeing that, I also tried to take cover, and by the time I took cover, this guy came into the main entrance door aisle, and it's a small mosque. There were around 60, 70 people there, and just around the entrance door there were old people sitting on the chairs and praying, and he started shooting at them, and he came in the entrance door, and I was lying down, I was seeing him shooting, and just that moment there was one young guy who usually takes care of the mosque and helps in parking and other stuff, so he saw an opportunity and pounced over him and grabbed his gun and
grabbed the gun from his hands as he was shooting.
Gun, yes, and he was completely with body armor, and he had a helmet, he had a vest and backpack, and he was shooting indiscriminately. Like there was a lady screaming and help, and then he shot point blank in her face, and by the time this guy pounced and snatched his gun, and he threw his remaining guns and ran. So this guy also the hero, he tried to chase and he couldn't find the trigger in that, and he didn't.
So he took the gun off him and pursued
yes, absolutely. He ran behind him, and by the time there were people waiting for him in the car, and he fled. Ran behind him, and by the time there were people waiting for him in the car, and he fled.
So there we are. There were others waiting in the car, and he fled. And then finally, there's this.
He was very well trained.
I'll go back to.
doing is that he's come through all of this with nothing but love for his country and for his fellow Kiwis. Every Friday, Sherif and his family, his mother, father and siblings, go to their local mosque to pray, a time for quiet reflection.
This Friday was like any other. We usually go as a family. It's a good time to be together. And it was around 1:40 that the gunman walked in, just firing shots at everyone.
What did you think in that moment?
The feeling was surreal. It's not something I would expect. Nothing. It's just something out of like a movie or something. I don't know.
What did you notice about the gunman?
He was very well trained. He obviously knew what he was doing. He was very well trained. He obviously knew what he was doing. He obviously knew what he was doing.
So, I'd just like to finish off by sharing an article from SOTNet. So it's entitled Christchurch Terror Attack, Mass Censorship, Mystery Shooters and the Globetrotting Lone Gunman. I haven't got details here of the author, unfortunately. So I'm going to scroll down to where he starts talking about the censored video and read excerpts. So as expected, the official narrative has collapsed on a lone gunman. On the one hand, it's a plausible narrative. The whole world saw or were told about that which is now illegal to personally verify. One gunman murdering 42 of the 50 victims at the first mosque. On the other hand, there are clues that he had help doing it. No one can doubt that he is the killer. But did he plan and carry it out all by himself? At timestamp 6:37 in Tarrant's video, we see him shoot dead the first of his victims in the front to the Al Noor Mosque. This presumably corresponds to 1:40 local time, which remains unchanged in the consensus timeline as the moment shots were first fired. The next 5 minutes are horrific to say the least. Tarrant unloads magazine after magazine into everyone who could not escape the mosque, briefly exits into the car park, then returns to fire additional shots into every single slain person in the main room. He does this so methodically that you're left wondering whether he had prior experience doing this sort of thing. He is now known to have had target practice at a gun club, but is that really the extent of his training? So there goes the grey Subaru Tarrant drove. At 12:30 in the video, Tarrant is driving away at high speed north on Deans Avenue, then east on Beeley Avenue. According to Google Maps, it takes 11 minutes to travel the 7 kilometres by car from one mosque to the other. His video ends abruptly at 17 minutes, so we can't see him make it to the second mosque, which is odd considering his obvious intention to broadcast or at least record his complete mission. By this point, we've seen him driving for 4.5 minutes since leaving the Al Noor Mosque, and he has made it as far as the intersection of Beeley and Fitzgerald Avenues, part of the 4 main avenues surrounding the CBD. So he has almost the same distance to travel to reach the Linwood Mosque on Linwood Avenue. This means presumably that the shooting there began no earlier than 15 minutes after it began at the Al Noor Mosque at 1:55 p.m. Tarrant was in custody 36 minutes after Christchurch police received their first call about a shooting at the mosque, which New Zealand's top cop, Police Commissioner Mike Bush, said occurred 1 minute after the first shots were fired. He was finally stopped on Brougham Street between the intersections of Strickland Street and Scott Street, which is almost the same distance again from the Linwood Mosque. This implies that Tarrant, from the moment he opened fire at the Al Noor Mosque, carried out his attacks at both locations inside 37 minutes, ending with his arrest at 2:17 p.m. So this photograph shows the 3 crime scenes, the mass shootings at these mosques, and the location of Tarrant's arrest. In Tarrant's video, you can clearly hear him speaking with someone as he's tearing east along Beeley Avenue. It's not Tarrant muttering to himself, and it's not Tarrant speaking to his audience. He's having a one-on-one conversation with someone about how the massacre at the Al Noor Mosque went down. The other person's voice, of a lower tone than Tarrant's, although faint, can be heard at one point, and whatever is said prompts Tarrant to laugh and respond. Among the comments made by Tarrant in this conversation, he says there's time for the fuel, presumably in reference to whatever they both knew was planned beforehand for the red jerry cans in the trunk of Tarrant's car. There may not have been someone present in the car with Tarrant, but that doesn't rule out a conversation with somebody over a car speakerphone and or via earpiece. So then the Linwood Mosque. In contrast to the clear video footage showing what happened at the Al Noor Mosque, what happened at the smaller Linwood Mosque is murky. All agree that the death toll there would have been higher, but for the fact that the attacker, for this event hiding his face with a mask or balaclava, was confronted and chased away. One version is that 48-year-old hero refugee Abdul Aziz, despite being unarmed, managed to at least temporarily distract and limit the gunman to shooting at worshippers from outside the building rather than entering it by throwing a credit card machine at him. Once the gunman was back in his car, Aziz says he saw him off by throwing a shotgun, which the gunman had dropped earlier at the car's windscreen, like an arrow, which, he said, shattered the windscreen, it didn't, and spooked him into driving away, and then Aziz chased after him on foot down the driveway and back onto Linwood Avenue. So there goes the driveway. Other eyewitnesses described the gunman as being confronted by an unnamed worshipper inside the small building. One eyewitness to this, Faisal Sayed, describes at the end of this interview how a young guy tackled the gunman from behind, which caused him to drop his weapon, flee the building, and escape the grounds in his car. This account is supported by another eyewitness, Sayed Mazharuddin, who told the New Zealand Herald, "The young guy who usually takes care of the mosque, he saw an opportunity and pounced on the gunman and took his gun. The hero tried to chase, but he couldn't find the trigger in the gun. He ran behind him, and there were people waiting for him in the car, and he fled." Now that's what I, from the interview I showed you before, but in fact in the version that I saw in the New Zealand Herald, this very key phrase had actually been whitewashed out of it. And the version that I'm relying on is from the UK Daily Mail. Is this a different hero? Two different gunmen, perhaps? These two versions of the events may not conflict. They could, for example, be describing two confrontations against one gunmen by two different people in sequence. But what is most interesting is Massacred's closing statement about people waiting in the car the gunman escaped in. Both of the accounts agree that the attackers at the Linwood Mosque fled in a car. So what are we to make of these statements from the manager of a business located nearby? A second shooting happened at a mosque in Linwood area of the city. Witnesses say that they heard multiple gunshots around 1:45 p.m. Mark Nichols, manager of Premium Tyres and Auto in Linwood, said he saw a gunman run past his shop around 45 minutes ago. He heard 5 gunshots, and he believed the activity was centred around the nearby Linwood Masjid Mosque. He saw 2 injured people carried on stretchers past his shops. Both appeared to be alive. I've seen a guy with a gun running up the road. He's been firing about 5 shots, I think we heard, Nichols said. It might have been a shotgun. I didn't get a good look of it. I just cleared off. So to pass the entrance to Premium Tyres, situated on the opposite side of Linwood Avenue on foot, Tarrant would have to at least temporarily exit his car, but Aziz said he witnessed the car speed away on Linwood Avenue when he chased it down the mosque's driveway. So this shows the position of the Linwood Islamic Centre, a small mosque set back from Linwood Avenue, and Premium Tyres is across the avenue with its storefront facing southeast away from the mosque. Someone passing on foot needs to cover at least 110 metres. Another eyewitness reported seeing 2 police cars cordoned off near Harrow Street, located about 1 kilometre south of the Linwood Mosque. There they arrested another man, images of which the New Zealand Herald has apparently seen, although they do not appear to be in the public domain. A Christchurch woman has reported watching a man being arrested on Harrow Street. Images captured of the scene show a man being apprehended by a police officer. 2 police cars are stationed nearby, blocking off the street. And so could this have been the armed man seen running past Premium Tyres east on Linwood Avenue? There's been no follow-up from the police about this arrest. And then double trouble at the Tarrant arrest. Though he has since said that just one IED, improvised explosive device, was found in just one car, recall that Commissioner Bush specifically confirmed at his first press conference 3 hours after the Linwood attack ended, saying that several IEDs attached to cars have now been made safe now. You don't say, much less confirm several, anything, unless you have in mind at least 2, and more likely 3 or higher vehicles with bombs in them. Emphasizing his point, he subsequently commented, "This speaks to the seriousness of what occurred." A Guardian stringer cited police sources as saying they were searching for 3 people in the area, while a local man said a white van was at the centre of police focus. One eyewitness to Tarrant's arrest on Brougham Street reported that a second man was in Tarrant's silver Subaru and that this man escaped from police at the scene. Confronting scenes. On Brougham Street, an east-west 4-lane motorway across the city's south, a white station wagon was pinned by a police car. Paul Chalmers of Lincoln, a university town south of Christchurch, saw what happened. A police car, he says, cut across the road and rammed into the side of this guy's car and he tipped the car up on its side so that only one side of the car's wheels were on the ground, and the two officers were dragging the guy out. One of them had a gun on him. "Mate!" The cops looked real worried about getting him out. One of them had a gun on him, and they dragged him out of the car. Another bystander, a Scotsman called Martin Brown, cuts in. "Apparently there were two in the car." Chalmers: "Was there two? I didn't see the second guy." Brown: "I heard someone down there," he points to Scott Street, "and said there were two in the car and one of them got away from them." So those were statements given to newsroom.co.nz on the 15th of March. On the day of the attacks, it was reported that in addition to a bomb having been defused in Tarrant Subaru, a second bomb had been defused in a white vehicle on Strickland Street. And this incident was later conflated with Tarrant's arrest, apparently because the location's proximity to Brougham Street. However, we know from this local media report that there was at least one other separate incident in the immediate area south of the city centre that afternoon. A different man was arrested there after having been stopped driving a white sedan. A modified long gun, apparently a shotgun fitted with a silencer, was found in his possession. So there's a photograph from Strickland Street, and that's a close-up. The authorities are not saying anything about who this man on Strickland Street was, nor who the man arrested in Harrow Street was, leaving it implied that they are from among the 4 people police confirmed arresting on the immediate aftermath of the attacks. Besides Tarrant, the 3 others have since been charged with offences, although Commissioner Bush insists that none were involved in the attacks. 2, a man and a woman, were charged with illegal possession of firearms, while an 18-year-old was charged with publishing objectionable publications on the basis that he shared a link to Tarrant's video and allegedly sometime prior to the attacks published an image of the El Noor Mosque with the caption, "Target acquired." So, simultaneous active shooter training and foreign military snipers. One of the hallmarks of false flag events is simultaneous drills or training events being held in the city for emergency response personnel. New Zealand is one of only a handful of remaining countries in the world where the police do not generally carry firearms. But when Tarrant's car was rammed by police, the 2 arresting officers were lucky to intercept him. Their boss, Senior Sergeant Peter Stills, recounted the fortuitous intervention to the New Zealand Herald. They were actually training when the call came through that there was an active armed offender in Christchurch. They had their work vehicles there with them, with firearms in them. They operationalized themselves and got into one car, decided to skirt the city. They thought that's what the offender would do. Rather than drive through the CBD, they were driving on Brougham Street because they thought if he'd just been to Linwood, that's a route he might take. We practiced for this stuff, to be honest. It was lucky 2 officers with that amount of service and experience were there. The training session was on how to deal with armed offenders or active shooter situations and was being held in a facility at the nearby Princess Margaret Hospital. Actually, it's not so nearby. It's quite a long distance away. This meant police officers did not have to first meet up at their stations and arm themselves, which enabled tactical response units, some in plain clothes, to respond in unusually fast time to the reports of shots fired at multiple locations. New Zealand Police Association President Chris Cahill was proud of his colleagues, saying, "Any police force in the world to get to the scene in 6 minutes, a specialist team there in 10, now that would be a success." On the simultaneous active shooter training for Christchurch officers, Cahill said it was a hell of a coincidence. Some of the world's most deadly sharpshooters were in Christchurch when New Zealand's worst ever terror attack unfolded on Friday, with the New Zealand SAS taking to the streets to help hunt the rampaging mosque shooter. Snipers from the New Zealand military, as well as professional snipers from Australia and Asian countries, have been at the Defence Force shooting range at West Milton, 25 kilometres west of the city. 25 kilometres, the Herald has been told. When the massacre unfolded, they were sprung into action and understood to have been granted special powers to take up arms in order to protect the public. New Zealand SAS soldiers were photographed with weapons and balaclavas masking their face near the Al Noor Mosque by Hatley Park, where a gunman stormed Friday prayer and shot dead more than 40 people, actually 50. Others responded to a call out at Papanui High School, which was feared to have been under attack too. Heavily armed masked officers were seen travelling in civilian rental vehicles with police on Friday afternoon. New Zealand Police Special Tactics Group STG officers were also on the front line. The presence of such heavy firepower in the form of New Zealand's most elite police and military units can indeed be seen as a hell of a coincidence, and something that relatively new, I might add. What this overlooks, however, is the flip side to coincidental arrangements like this. The presence of foreign sharpshooters and elite military marksmen on the scene provides ideal cover for intelligence perpetrators to blend in, present credible ID, provide plausible reasons for being on or near the scene, and even pull ranks on junior officers inexperienced in handling firearms, much less responding to an intentionally chaotic multi-site terror attack. So, and here's how it could happen. Now, he's written another article previously, which I will reference. He said, I referenced the arrest of this man outside Papanui High School. He has since been cleared of any involvement and named as a local 30-year-old man, Stephen Miller. In statements he made to the New Zealand Herald, Miller said he was at the school to pick up his 13-year-old brother-in-law and just happens to be fond of wearing camouflage clothing. As far as the narrative is concerned, this clears up any confusion about the presence of gunmen at or near this high school. The point they miss, however, is that a heavy police response was drawn to this school, miles from either mosque, just as the shooting sprees came to an end. A video recorded on a bystander's phone, time unknown, shows two other men armed with long guns outside the entrance to the high school that day, with one of them seen entering the premises. So the bystander who recorded this footage was situated on the opposite side of Langdon's Road, so a road I know very well, in the car park at the back of the Papanui Library facing the entrance to the Papanui High School, which means the armed men's location when they are filmed is here. Papanui students and staff said their school went into lockdown when an alarm went off at about 2:30 p.m. It's unknown what prompted that, but a police helicopter with a marksman hanging out of it was soon seen circling very low overhead for about an hour while armed police, some in uniform, some not, searched the school grounds and surrounding streets on foot. Although it's plausible that the two armed men outside the school in the above video were members of a plainclothes tactical response unit, the rapidly empowered SAS or foreign marksmen, the fact remains that a significant armed response was deemed necessary to investigate a reported threat at a location miles away from what were, by this time, the two known major crime scenes, the mosques. In addition, this armed response continued for an hour from 2:30 to 3:30. Recall that Tarrant was arrested at 2:17. If there was never any reason to presume that more than one shooter was involved, because there was officially only one, and the single shooter was already in custody, why would this kind of response have occurred? Papanui High School is situated 6 kilometres north of the Al Noor Mosque and over 7 kilometres from the Linwood Mosque. Incredibly, though, that isn't the furthest location to which armed police responded. And the New Zealand Herald reported this, and this is the first time I've seen this. Christchurch resident Mandy Rooney was trapped in her car within metres of a mosque in Bishopdale. She said she tried to get out of their car to see what was going on, but was ordered back into her vehicle by armed police. They have their guns up and are walking around scoping through them, she said. It's chaos. People have been trying to drive away, but are just crashing into other vehicles. The small mosque in Bishopdale is called the Rashula Centre and is located a further 3 kilometres northeast of Papanui High School, or 7.5 kilometres by car northeast of the Al Noor Mosque. In addition to all schools, all hospitals in Christchurch were placed under armed guard, something that was probably prompted by someone reporting gunfire at Christchurch Hospital in the city centre. Similar security responses occurred beyond Christchurch, with the New Zealand military conducting 3 controlled explosions after bomb calls were made to Auckland's main train station hours after Tarrant's arrest. A pattern of police being drawn across the city is reminiscent to what occurred immediately following the Las Vegas terror attack, when the Las Vegas police and Henderson SWAT teams were redirected to casino resorts as far north as 2 miles up the Vegas Strip to investigate reports of gunfire at these venues. Clearly, police resources become strained by having to investigate each incident, when in addition many of the police are not in uniform but are sporting powerful weapons. We can see how additional gunmen or spotters party to the attacks and intent on escape could easily blend in. Now he goes from here into Tarrant's history of globetrotting, going to places like Pakistan, Turkey, and Israel. But I'll go past that. And there's just one final little update here. Update, Friday the 22nd of March 2000 and 19. Police Commissioner Mike Bush has since adjusted the official timeline, stating at a press conference on Wednesday the 20th of March that the police stopped Tarrant 21 minutes after they received the first emergency call of shooting at the Al Noor Mosque at 1:41 p.m, and explaining that the earlier time he gave of 36 minutes was actually a reference to how long it took to put Tarrant in custody. So within 10 minutes, the armed offenders squad were on the scene ready to respond, Bush said. Within 21 minutes, the person that is now in custody was arrested, 21 minutes from when we were first notified. Bush acknowledged this was a change of information. I have previously said the official offender was in our custody within 36 minutes, he said. I've now been made aware that while we had the offender in custody at the Justice Precinct within 36 minutes, it in fact only took 21 minutes from the first 111 call for the offender to be apprehended at the roadside by the two officers. So recall that Tarrant opened fire at the Al Noor Mosque at 1:40, which corresponds to 6:36 in his video. When we last see him, at the end of his video, the timestamp is 16:55. He's reached the intersection of Bailey and Fitzgerald Avenues at 1:50 p.m, 9 minutes after police received the first emergency call. According to the new timeline, this leaves Tarrant just 11 minutes to drive the remaining 3 kilometres to Linwood Mosque, open fire on worshippers there for 4 maximum minutes, and then drive another 5 kilometres until his arrest on Brougham Street. Well, that's perhaps possible with someone with training, but it's very tight. So, folks, that's the evidence. At the very minimum, if you just take the simple evidence that I provided from the television interviews, the government and authorities are lying to you about their lone wolf narrative, unless each one of these witnesses was, of course. Now, one could call this a conspiracy theory, were it not official conspiracy theory, but for the fact that if it involves just one person, it can't be called a conspiracy. Now, if we take into account the evidence that I've just shared, the truth is far, far more dark and undermines whatever faith one had in government of any political stripe. I cannot tell you, in all honesty, who did it. No one can. And if they claim to, they're either lying or playing into the divide and rule game of the authorities. So what I am sharing, to paraphrase Max Egan, are not my opinions, but this is where the evidence is heading. Whatever the ultimate truth, wherever the ultimate truth lies, this is New Zealand's 9/11, and nothing will ever be the same again in this country. We can kiss our liberty goodbye. This is Seymour Rocks reporting from down under.